What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Spring Hills Podcast. Today we're going to be doing a one-on-one interview with one of our Spring Hills staff members, and our guest today is Jerilyn Valentine, one of our worship pastors and also our small groups director. Now, I'm really excited about this because Jerilyn and I work together often in the music ministry, so I've gotten to know her really well, but this interview is fascinating to me. I learned so much about her, her story, her upbringing, her testimony, why she got into ministry, just all these different things that I just had no clue about. So I'm super excited about this interview. I'm also really excited because I get to pick the theme song for each one of these interviews, and Jerilyn, she's on pins and needles. She can't wait to find out what I'm going to pick. So let's get to this interview with Jerilyn. And Jerilyn, I hope you enjoy your theme song. All right, we're doing another one-on-one interview. I threw this on this particular staff person right now. I literally just said, hey, I'm going to have you stick around. We just did a small group thing. So now you can, if you heard the small groups podcast, you know that our guest today is Jerilyn Valentine. Now, Jerilyn is both the small groups director and she's also the co-worship pastor. I don't know. None of us know what our official titles are here. We all do a bunch of things. But Jerilyn and I both lead worship and are on stage. So you have seen us on stage if you attend or watch online. And Jerilyn, you have the red hair, right? We can tell people that.
I'm the redhead.
The redhead on stage.
If they can't tell the difference between us, just look for the hair color.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. That's how you tell the difference.
I don't know if that's super offensive to me or you. I'm not sure how we...
Well, I have tattoos. That's the other way you can tell. So red hair is Jerilyn, tattoos is Garrett.
Don't go by gender, just go by hair color or tattoos.
Garrett and Jerilyn are tattoos and red hair. So what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about Jerilyn, and I'm going to do my very best to not talk about myself. But we're going to talk about Jerilyn, find out more about her, where she came from. Now, this is the first person that's going to be part of these one-on-one interviews where you're not born and raised in California.
That's
the rest
right.
of us so far have been California-raised kids, mostly in this area.
Interesting.
John Knapp and I are actually from the same area down in the Central Valley, which brings me to my next point. I will pick out a theme song for you.
Absolutely.
Now, I have chosen, I'm very excited about this because this has become a thing.
I get to know?
Well, and I haven't chosen one for you yet.
Oh, tracking.
So what I'll do is I'll listen when I edit the podcast. I'll listen and I'll go, what's going to fit this? Because basically what's happened is Erica, I ended up using like a movie trailer epic music.
Yes.
Brett was like a hard rock song. Garrett
Yes.
Ward, I just for some reason decided hip hop was the way to go.
Feels right.
John Knapp, because we're both from Cowtowns, I used a country song, just things like that, right? So I'll listen to your story a little bit and I'll be like,
great.
okay, you know what? This is going to fit Jer.
So
yeah, you don't get a say in it.
No, I want the
Nope, you don't get a say in it.
No, I want the theme song that Kronk makes for himself and then for his new group.
Yeah, the theme song would just be Jared going
Oh, he's making his own theme song.
I will also apologize in advance. Jerilyn and I spent a lot of time together.
We do.
And so we'll try to stay away from inside jokes.
I'm so
sorry. We'll give that a shot. Just in case people aren't real sure if they've seen you on stage. How else might they know you here on campus?
Ooh, wow. Let's see. I like to wear flowy, flowery clothes.
Not quite what I mean, but yeah, sure.
I was like, I don't know.
No. I mean, like, what are the roles? You're the small groups director,
yes,
also.
Right. I got you. Yeah. So I
Not your
worship
physical
lead.
appearance.
I lead worship on the weekends with you.
Yeah.
And then I also am the small groups director. And basically what that means is that I'm doing my best to equip our small group leaders to really care for our church family.
That's a good answer. With flowy shirts, apparently. Great.
I was like, I don't know. People tell me they like my flower shirts.
So, Jerilyn, where are you from? You are not a California-raised kid. So
That's right.
Give us a little bit of a background where you're from, and don't go too deep into what brought you to California yet.
Sure.
Stick with the childhood. We're Montana, right?
Yes.
So, tell us about Montana.
I have dual citizenship. I was born in Canada, so I have a Canadian birth certificate, which I'm pretty sure makes me a Canadian citizen. I might be wrong. Anyways, and then I'm American citizen.
Did you live in Canada, or was that just where you were born?
I was born there, and we moved to Montana when I was 5 years old.
I think I knew you were born in Canada. I don't think I knew you were there for 5 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What took you guys to Montana?
Really cool. My dad, he planted a church in Canada. And then our church that we ended up spending, I mean, it's still our home church in Montana, but my dad pastored there for another 27 years. So when I was 5, we moved, and he became a pastor at the church where we stayed, and I grew up, and it was just a wonderful church family. But that's what brought us to Montana.
When you were 5.
Correct.
And now you have 2 younger siblings, correct?
I do, yes.
Sisters?
Yep.
What is the age difference there?
Let's see. Victoria is 3 years younger than me, so I'm 31. She's whatever that would be, and then Olivia.
Math is hard.
Math's hard for me. Olivia is 7 years younger than me, so you guys can do the math if you care.
I was more just like, so you were 7 when your youngest sibling was born. Is
Correct. That's
okay,
right.
That's where we're at now. What were you? What kind of kid were you? Were you the troublemaker? Were you the? I would venture to guess that you were a little more reserved in your troublemaking schemes, right? Or were you a troublemaker?
Well, I mean, this would speak to the pride that you could see as an adult in me, but I really wanted to be good. Like, I wanted to perform and rise to the challenge and stuff. So any ways that my parents, taught me this is what a good girl would do, I did that. And it wasn't necessarily that I was just a really good girl. I just really wanted to like kill the game in the morality performance department. Child. Yes. Great. I learned to be a black sheep later, but no. I'm just
Were you and your siblings close? I mean, 7 years apart, but were you close? Were you
friendship-wise?
Yes.
I think Victoria and I, my middle sister, we definitely have a friendship, and then Olivia and I have a friendship today, but probably when
it's
Olivia...
It's a big gap when you're younger.
It's a bigger gap. So I had more, I think she would
you're in
say
junior
more
high
of
and
a
she's
like...
in kindergarten.
Right, exactly. But now we have a very good friendship. So.
Yeah, and she just got married, right? That was
she
what you were
did.
just up in Montana
That's right.
Or recently.
That's right.
That's cool. So you got to go back up to Montana. Tell me about your parents a little bit.
Yes.
I met your parents, and I'm so bad with Jeff, right?
Jeff, oh my goodness, that's not bad. Marilee,
that's right. Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Marilee.
No,
if you
you're
listen
great.
to this, I do apologize. Jeff and Marilee. Okay, so tell us about your parents a little bit. They planted a church.
They did. Yes, my they met in college at a college called Crown University in
Canada?
In Minnesota, St. Paul Bible College.
So are they not Canadian?
My dad is. My mom grew up in Montana, like an hour away from where I ended up growing up. Okay. But she and my dad both went away to school in Minnesota, and that's where they met each other. And everything.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Cool.
And they're wonderful. I've been blessed, I think, with wonderful parents, and so they went to plant a church in Canada and really delighted in that. I'm sure it came with, I can only imagine, a lot of challenges too. And then moved to Montana, and my mom, she really, I would say they pastored the church together. My dad was definitely the leader of our church, but she just had such cool, her dad, my grandpa, was a really cool innovator with like evangelistic strategies and things like that. And my mom inherited that from him and brought it to the table in our church in Montana.
Cool.
So that's cool. Yeah.
And when you guys moved to Montana, what was his role at the church that he ended up at?
My dad?
Yeah.
He was senior pastor there. So he planted the church in Canada, and then he took on the in our denomination, we called it senior pastor, I think.
What was the denomination?
Christian and Missionary Alliance.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Right on. My dad, so this is interesting because Brett, obviously we know that Brett planted this church.
Yes.
Back in the early 90s. My dad and I planted a church together.
Right.
Now my dad, I was an adult at this point. I had already been in ministry for 5 or 6 years at this point when we planted church. But there's a lot of church planting roots here, which is cool. It is actually something that I don't think I knew too many people that had planted churches when I grew up, because I was at a church that had been around since the early 1900s. That was what my dad, he was at that church for, I think, 20 years almost.
Wow, that's cool.
And so we planted a church together. It's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot imagine doing that with young kids. So Maverick, when we planted the church, Maverick was not born.
Okay.
And so he was actually born a couple years after we planted the church, which we were already kind of established and had our, feet. We hit the ground running, obviously, but then once you get your feet under you, you're like, okay, we know what we're doing. So it was a little bit like a little bit easier. But it was interesting to hear that your dad planted a church when you were young. So what was the experience?
Before I was born, actually. I think I was born into that church probably maybe after they were there for not all that long.
Okay, cool.
But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then your memories are probably more of the church he became senior pastor at.
Correct. Yes.
Okay,
in
cool.
Montana, right. Mm-hmm.
Right on. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit of your maybe your relationship with Christ growing up. So you grew up in church. Now, we've had there's a variety of different testimonies we've heard from staff members of not being a Christian growing up, never even being in church. Right. Brett has the story he shared numerous times about hearing a band at lunchtime at school, and that was his kind of introduction to it.
Right.
And then even him becoming a Christian and not knowing that you were supposed to attend church again, just things like that. You grew up in church. What was your relationship with Christ like? When did you become a Christian?
Yeah, I think my parents killed the game in exposing me to who God is and just to value the Bible and to really help me believe that I could have a relationship with him at a very young age. My mom, when I was 3 years old at the time, actually not quite 3, when my sister was born. And about 2 weeks after my sister was born, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer.
Okay, wow.
And they actually told her she had like a 2% chance of living type of thing, that, she should just pray that she could see her newborn baby, turn like 2 years old. Wow. Type of thing. So that was really traumatic for my mom. And I don't remember all that much about it, but I do very vaguely remember being comforted by God during that time. And my grandpa had a story that he loved telling where I called Jesus on my telephone, my little Fisher's Price telephone, and he told me my mom was going to be okay, and I was comforted by that. And but that's part of when in my early years as a vocational minister, when I was out of college, and I was a children's director, a children's pastor, and so a lot of the reason that I had such a passion for that was that I experienced really genuine relationship with God at a young age, not because I'm awesome or anything, but because I had people who taught me.
You are awesome, Jared. Don't say that.
Thanks, Garrett. But I had people who taught me that was possible. So I was really passionate about equipping other people to teach kids that you can have a relationship with God. You don't just have to believe things about him. You can actually know him.
Yeah, interesting. Cool. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you had growing up in church and stuff. Tell me a little bit about junior high and high school.
I loved, I was my youth pastor, who became my youth pastor when I was in junior high. His name was John Odell, and he, I think, was one of the most significant, wonderful gifts that God gave me, because he had such a passion for teaching God's word. I even remember moments where he would be, teaching a room of like 20, 25 junior hires or high schoolers, and he would be moved to tears about the things that he was talking about. And I really looked up to him. I thought he was really cool. And are
you still in touch with him?
A little bit. Okay. I might, now that I'm talking about him, I should send him this podcast. But he really cast phenomenal vision for me that that God's word is such a wonderful gift that we have. So I started reading the Bible on my own when I was in junior high, and then I just really loved youth group. And he was a really cool youth leader in that he gave, multiple opportunities throughout the week to not only come to youth group but also to serve. So a lot of my, junior high school extracurricular activities were cool ministry opportunities that my youth pastor provided us with. But then I also loved music and theater. I got to be Eponine and Les Mis in high school.
Wow.
And
that's cool.
That was really fun. But
I was a theater kid too.
Yes, of course. That makes so much sense. I love it. Well, yeah, I remember you telling me some cool roles that you've had too.
Oh yeah, I had a lot of fun in it, and we'll talk about that at another time.
I love it.
I told Jerilyn that I needed to make sure that I didn't share too many of my own stories, because this is about Jer, not about Garrett. Yeah, that's really cool that you were in theater and stuff too. So that was obviously, that's a hobby of yours then.
Yes.
Was singing, were you in choir? Did you just say that?
Yeah, I felt really special in junior high. They made kids pick between band and choir, but they let me go to both. So I got to kind of like bounce between the two of them.
What was your instrument?
Flute.
Oh, you're a flautist.
Player. A flautist.
A flautist.
Yes.
What a weird word, but yes, that's what it is.
That's right. Yeah.
My mom's a flautist. She played the flute. She was good, and the piano.
I love it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Me too. I loved piano. I took like 9 years of piano
This
lessons.
is so funny because you, Patricia, and Andrea, you all play the piano, but never on stage. And I literally did not know that you guys all played the piano.
You didn't? That's funny.
I had no clue. I just found out that Patricia plays the piano like a month ago when we did
That doesn't surprise me, but it does
podcast.
too. Yeah.
And then Andrea used to say she doesn't play an instrument, and then when I would text her about a song or something, she'd send me an audio recording of her singing the song, and she's playing the piano. And I'm like, wait, you play the piano? And she's like, well, I'm not any good at it. I'm like, yes, you are. I'm listening to you play it right now.
That's funny.
So I've never heard you play the piano. Are you good at it?
I mean,
9 years.
Oh, I'm decent. I don't know that I would ever be very good at it in a worship context.
It's been a while.
It's so hard for me to multitask. Well, I don't really have that much access to a piano right now, but when I was in Montana recently, we have
There's
a piano.
There's a piano 5 feet away from you right now.
I mean, like in my apartment, like it's a way that I relax. I like some people watch Netflix. I like to sit down at the piano and just like play random stuff. Yeah,
that's
piano
cool.
and chill.
Piano and chill. So in high school, what about friends? Were you a social butterfly? Were you kind of I mean, some people are like, no, I was kind of a loner. I just was fine being by myself. What were you like?
I have been described as an outgoing introvert, so I really like to be by myself. But when I'm with people, I like to interact with them. You know, I don't just kind of like sit off. If there's a room full of people, I want to be with the people. Yeah. So at school, and then when I got invited to stuff, youth group and stuff, I had lots of friends and really loved it.
You were social.
I was social, but I would never have been the person to like say, hey, I'm just by myself at home right now. Do you want to go to a movie or something like that? I would just be home like reading or playing piano or whatever. If I got the chance to be alone, I would. So that made it a little different. I feel like I didn't have as deep relationships as some of my friends did with each other.
So do you feel like so this is, you were the first one to say, maybe it was Kiki that told me this, an extroverted introvert, right? Or an outgoing introvert.
Yeah.
And it made me actually go, oh, this is making more sense now because I'm an introverted extrovert.
Interesting.
In the sense that I can go to the movies by myself.
Yes.
I can sit.
I call you an ambivert.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I can be an introvert, but I miss people. Like I need to be around people. I love being around people. So like being around people does not drain me whatsoever. I like being around people. I have fun being around people. I like doing things like this and talking to people.
Right.
Versus like, Caitlin, if she's around people for a long period of time, she needs the isolated time to kind of recharge, right? So what about you?
Yeah, I tell myself I have like a 4-hour limit. Not in that like I hate people once it hits 4 hours, but if I start to feel really tired, that's usually when I start to say like meaner things to myself, like why can't you just do things well, or why, or like why or
why
if
can't you just be good?
Yeah. Or like if I'm, say something mean to a friend or whatever, I usually realize it's like, oh, it's because I haven't recharged by myself yet.
Okay.
So if I do the math in my head, I'm like, well, if I've been with people 4+ hours or in like a trip, or like a missions trip, I know that I'm supposed to like absolutely love those, but I've had a couple that I just hated, not because of what we did, but because there's literally not a single opportunity to be alone.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm gonna
Do you
cry.
ever feel rude, like needing alone time? I struggle with that.
I learned.
Like,
I
feel
think
selfish.
I've come a long way. Yeah, I used to see it as selfishness, but I have also noticed that when I'm with people, I'm pretty all in. Like I can be. I think it's made me a little bit of a better listener and stuff. So, and I probably would be less like drained in a social environment if I wasn't as so all in type of thing. So I just see it as like, yeah, I'm human and I'm not Jesus and I have to refuel. And even Jesus had to refuel. So he set that, set that example. Hashtag I'm not Jesus.
We should make shirts. That'd be a good one. So you didn't play sports, did you?
I didn't. I think I would have loved dancing.
Oh, cool.
I love it now, but I'm not good at it. But like I didn't do any sports.
I took ballet.
Oh, did you
yes,
really?
Yes, this is something that
so makes sense.
Well, not because like I went, hey mom, dad, I want to take ballet. No, it was a part of a basketball team I was on.
Oh, that's cool.
It was kind of this
makes
big
you a better
thing.
athlete, yeah.
Oh yeah, the agility
Absolutely.
and the balance and coordination.
This is not an inside joke, but kind of is. But I once asked if you were a legit ninja.
A ninja.
So now I'm going to be like, are you a legit ballerina?
Yeah,
be a thing.
a legit ballerina and a ninja. That's what I am. Were there any other hobbies that you had in high school? So you did, you had theater that you talked about. Obviously, we know that you were musical.
I did.
Sounds like mission trips were also something you were involved in?
Yep, I did. I got the chance to go to Brazil actually twice.
Oh, cool.
I felt a spoiled person. I got to go and just loved it. Oh, my word.
That's cool.
And I acquired the nickname Sapio, I think is how you say it. Sapo, which is like little toad, which is not all that flattering, but I can explain why, and it's not insulting. But after that,
little toad,
it like frogs became.
You shouldn't have told me that.
I know. I'm so sorry. Frogs became a symbol of just like my love for Brazil. But then it literally, people didn't know like, oh, Jerilyn's a Christian or Jerilyn has red hair or anything. It would be like, oh, Jerilyn's the crazy girl that loves frogs. Like that was the thing that everyone in my high school, didn't have a huge class by like 300 people, but it was like
public school.
Yeah. They're like, yeah, Jeris loves frogs. I drew frogs on all my papers when I was doodling and stuff.
Did you ever have anything that came up and you're like, how did this become a thing?
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying by that? Like, oh, Jared loves frogs. You're like, why? How did that spread? Or whatever. Like, people
how
just
did people all find out? I think it's because I would react to anything that was frogs. Like,
okay.
Oh my word! Because I love their eyes. Their eyes are so cute.
Yeah. There's the guy in that show that loves frogs.
Oh, I don't know that.
It?
No.
Oh, you would
awesome.
think it's hilarious. He's not in it very much. There's a couple scenes. You could probably just even look it up. Say, Frogman or whatever. And there's just one scene where he gives him, I forget what it is. It's like a cup and it's got a picture of a frog on it.
Yes.
He's like, that's a frog. That guy, he's a jumper for sure. Like, you can tell. And he's just super excited about frogs.
I
you
guarantee
would really relate to him.
Anyone who has known me longer than 5 minutes, not anymore, but back then, if they see that episode, they will think of me. They'll be like, this makes me think of Jerilyn.
So you never have gotten any text messages about it?
No, apparently. So maybe I'm overthinking, but.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Okay, so let's move to college then. So you, we are mortal enemies because you are a Biola.
That's right.
Student, and I was a Zusa.
Which was silly.
Now, my brother was a Biolan. Is that what you guys go by, Biolans, or do you just go by evil? I'm just kidding.
Wow.
No,
we have a bubble, so I don't know. We're the Bubbleites.
The Bubbleites? What is that?
I don't know. I just made it up.
Oh, okay. So yeah, Biola. What took you to Biola all the way from Montana?
Let's see. So I actually originally, when I graduated high school, I went for a year to Seattle Pacific University in Seattle.
That is an Azusa
which is
Pacific
your
sister school.
Exactly, a sister school. So I'm kind of like, we're kind of on the same side. But I ended up transferring to Biola it's kind of a long story why, but it was a really great decision. I was just thinking, the incredible man that I'm dating, I was thinking about how, wow, if I had known back then.
We're going
to
get to that and how much credit I get for that, by the way.
Yes, I love it. But yes, I was like, man, that little decision that I, agonized over, but it's a big, changing thing. So.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So what about Biola was it that made you want to go there?
Well, I came down from Montana to check out schools, like the senior. That's what I did when I was a senior in high school, is checked out which school I wanted to go to. And I wanted to check out Westmont and Biola. And I was sure that I would love Westmont the most because in all the pictures, it looked like enchanting and there's like little bridges and forest setting. I loved it.
Point Loma and Westmont both have really cool campuses.
Oh, my word. Absolutely.
I mean, you're talking about Santa Barbara and
yes.
San Diego. I mean, Point Loma's I actually stayed a few nights there for basketball, and
really?
I was blown away at that campus. So
cool.
Oh
my word, it's so beautiful. But yeah, I went to the two, and I actually just really loved Biola, and there was some sort of intangible thing that just made me really feel like that was where I should go.
Yeah.
And it just turned out that the financial aid package, what didn't feel like a responsible decision to go there. And then Seattle Pacific had given me a really generous financial aid package. But my mom, I will credit her with just her tenacity and her just desire to help her kids accomplish their dreams. But she really wrestled with the fact that whole year that I was at Seattle Pacific that I wasn't at my dream school. And she wanted to help me be where I really wanted to be. And she prompted me to apply for a scholarship at Biola that was for underrepresented ethnicities.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, I can't apply to that, Mom. I'm not an underrepresented ethnicity. And she was like,
Redheads?
No, well, I mean, I don't want to get into anything too dicey, but my mom was like, no, I talked to the person who like chooses these scholarships, and I made it very clear that you are a Caucasian female, but she said that the program and the scholarship is for people who really appreciate diversity and who are committed to sort of being a champion for celebrating diversity at the school. So I wrote an essay, and they really liked it, and I got that scholarship, and it's what made it possible for me to go. That's
both a really cool scholarship and really cool that you got that.
Yeah.
I never have heard of that. That's really cool. It's really funny to me because the Azusa-Biola rivalry is what made me want to go to Azusa.
No way. I used to trash talk Azusa jokingly, but I grew so much respect for them because did you hear about the spoon prank that they played on Biola?
Yes.
I just thought that just for anyone, if you end up including this or anyone who's listening, there's
some good ones.
Biola got into the newspapers because there was someone wrote an article about the fact that students were stealing
all the
spoons
stuff.
The cafeteria.
This was my year.
That was your year?
Yeah, or one of the years I was there. But
Sure.
I remember being at the basketball games where they held up all the signs. Were you you there?
I love that. I don't know if I was there or not. I just heard that Azusa, we were playing Azusa, and I think it was on our campus at Biola.
Yeah, it was.
And they all brought plastic spoons.
Yes. I had a plastic spoon.
That was amazing.
Yes.
I was like, oh man, my hat's off to you, Azusa. You guys are awesome.
Let's get back to some other things though with college. So I've always been fascinated by what you studied. So
yeah,
you have
isn't as fascinating.
But you have a couple degrees, right?
I do.
So what are they, and what made you go to those degrees?
I majored in biochemistry, and then my minor was Bible, and then I had an additional minor in philosophy. And if I could go back, I would have chosen to major in philosophy, or at least double major in it, because I absolutely loved it. But I didn't find out that I loved philosophy until my second semester, my junior year. So I just threw on I actually stayed an additional semester to complete that minor, just because I was so passionate about learning.
And so is your master's degree in...
So my master's degree is in philosophy.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So that was, and I got both of those degrees from Biola. My master's degree was from Talbot Seminary, which is the sort of like partner with Biola.
Yeah. So what was the reason that you ended up? Well, I shouldn't say reason. Ministry, was that a goal of yours, or did you end up in ministry kind of by chance that you were like, okay, now God's calling me into this after you had your education?
Well, my dad, I talked about how he led the church that I grew up in for over 20 years. And he had a really incredible story where God just made it undeniably clear to him that was where he was calling him to be and to pastor. And as a, junior, senior in high school, I really wanted God to do that for me. I wanted him to tell me exactly what he wanted me to. I think I didn't really make it clear. I'm like what he wanted me to do, but I think what I really wanted is to know like what school should I go to and what should I major in, and I wanted him
not
to
necessarily what you should do in ministry.
Right. Well, I think that's how I said it, but it's like what I wanted was what should I do next. But but I was waiting for some sort of like writing on the wall moment to tell me exactly what to do, where to go, and it was really discouraging for me because I was kind of holding out for that, and it didn't happen. It kind of shook my like maybe I'm not special enough to God to get a specific calling type of thing. And my theology of what it means to be called and how calling works has changed quite a bit since then. But I was really admired my grandpa, my mom's dad, and that he was a pharmacist in his smaller town in Ronan, Montana. But he was just a really incredible champion for the gospel in his town, and he used his role as a pharmacist and as a healthcare provider to do that really well. And so I dreamed of doing the same thing. So I went to Seattle Pacific thinking I was going to go into pharmacy, and then I sort of like dwindled towards I wanted to maybe do medicine, and I thought of being a pediatrician again because I just love kids and things like that.
So is that where the biochemistry stuff came in?
So that's where I did that. It was sort of because pre-medicine you can pretty much major in whatever you want. You just have to get a good MCAT score. But if the science degrees give you the best chance at a good MCAT score.
Did school come easy to you?
School has always been really, really easy to me, and I get frustrated with that for other people because I think that just the way that school is structured fits my learning personality so well.
Oh, okay.
So I have this like huge advantage that doesn't necessarily reflect my intelligence advantages. It's just that it just works really well for my personality. But I have friends that would get worse grades or just felt like there were lots of topics that they didn't really understand. And I would be like, no, don't write it off. It's not that you don't have the intelligence to understand the topic. It's that the way that school is structured in the Western world just doesn't fit your learning personality. So that was a long answer to your question.
No,
but school was easy for me.
That's what I'm asking because it's not necessarily, my brother's brilliant. He's very smart, but school came so easy for him. And for me, it was just like, it was tedious, and it wasn't. Sure. It was always like I don't want to do this. I don't want to go to class. I hate sitting still for that long. You can even see me sitting here. I'm like moving around and wiggling, and it's just kind of like sitting there listening to somebody for an hour just was torture for me.
Right.
So that's why I ask if school was easy for you. I don't mean like it was a piece of cake, but like you enjoyed it. You enjoyed learning. You enjoyed the work and that kind of thing. I
usually don't volunteer this because it always sounds like bragging, but I skipped 3 years of math in high school. So I ended up going to our state university to get my calculus 2, like the second semester while I was in high school.
Oh, wow.
But the only reason I say this because...
And you couldn't subtract 3 from 31 earlier.
I know. I need a calculator now. But the first semester of high school, I went for that as a senior, but then I just didn't tell them that I didn't sign up for another math class.
Oh.
So I had like half the day of high school that I just always could skip and do
Yes.
whatever I want, just because I never told
You
the
worked
school
the
that
system.
I wasn't. Yes.
Thank you. I did too. I did the same thing.
Did you do the same thing? I think a lot of people do, so I don't feel all that guilty.
We
about
had
it,
like
but-
this ability because we were on a block schedule.
Oh,
so
yeah,
it was
exactly.
like it was just every other day you had different classes. So one day you had first period and the next day you started on fifth period, right?
Right.
And so basically what I did was I worked it out to where it was like I was I forget exactly what it was, but I had my free period
Yeah.
was fifth period, I think.
Yeah.
And then what I did for first period was I was the teacher's aide for a teacher that had a free period.
Yeah. I did
So,
that
like,
too.
I didn't have to do any. So I literally didn't have to show up to school until 9:45 every day my senior year, and it was amazing. I loved it.
great.
It got me ready for college. It was perfect.
I love it.
Yeah. Do you have any ministry goals beyond the ministries you're currently involved in?
Oh wow, that's a great question.
Right?
I love that. Yeah, I would love to write and publish something.
Like a book?
Yes, not necessarily because I feel like I have thoughts that the world needs to hear, but I've been so inspired by C.S. Lewis and the ways that he used fiction to teach kids about theology and about God, but then also adults, like his Great Divorce, his Screw Tape Letters. Just
Screw Tape Letters was one of those books that blew my mind.
it's amazing.
It's so cool.
It's such a gift, and he, I think battered up his soul to write it, type of thing. So I would love, someday to dip my toes into trying to write and see if it could go anywhere. I know it's kind of a tough
I think
thing,
it's so cool to also think about how C.S. Lewis, I think him and J.R. Tolkien, they met in like a writing group.
Yes.
And they became buddies. And I think it's C.S. Lewis convinced J.R. Tolkien to finish the story of Lord of the Rings.
Oh, that's funny. I
or
wouldn't
it might
be
be the other way
surprised.
around with Narnia. I think it's that way, but it could be the other way around with Narnia. I forget. But
one of my favorite authors was a huge inspiration to both Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. And they both, I think, at different stages in talking to people, credited this author as who inspired them to write for kids with theology
Who was that?
things. And the author's name is George MacDonald. So if anyone wants a book recommendation, read The Princess and the Goblin, which is by George MacDonald.
Caitlin has that book.
Oh my word!
I'm
Read it
pretty
to your
sure that's one of the
kids.
books
Read
that
it to
she's saved
yourself
around.
like a million times. It's so good.
Cool.
So.
Princess and the Goblin by George MacDonald. Great.
That's right.
I want to talk about ministry now. Do you think being in ministry is something that you find challenging as far as like when you go through hard things in your life, like trials, to continue on in ministry? I guess that's where I'm getting with that question.
Interesting.
Like, do you feel pressure on how you're dealing with something you're going through?
That's a great question. I don't know that I have a very clear answer to that. I would say that I grew up in sort of a spotlight already because my dad was the pastor of a church of, I think that at one point in time it was like 800 people, which is quite a few people for a Montana church. So I tell people that I had, it sounds again really arrogant, but I had like a pseudo
That's
mini.
the theme of this podcast.
I'm very arrogant. But
Jerilyn is not arrogant, by the way. If anybody ever thinks that, she's not.
I just want everyone to know how much I'm not hiding it. It's on the table. But I try to explain to people I had like a pseudo celebrity lifestyle, like where it's like there are just quite a few people who are very invested in your story, and that there were some downsides to that, but I would actually argue that they were mostly upsides, like profoundly just wonderful, very mature Christian people pouring into me at a young age as I grew up sort of in the spotlight. So I would say that in terms of like spotlight now today, it's always been kind of my normal to be in the spotlight. And to have people sort of invested in my story. I was annoyed in high school when I felt like people had an opinion of whether or not I should be dating so-and-so type of thing.
Yeah.
But if, on the whole, it was a gift. And I would say the same thing applies for me now, where there are some pressures associated for me now where when I'm going through a hard time, being in vocational ministries has some unique challenges that are frustrating to me. But for the most part, I would say the upsides of being a vocational minister when I'm going through something way outweigh everything else, because I do have there are tons of people here in our church that are praying fervently for my dad, who's in Montana. And I think that is just, and people asking me about that all the time and saying they're praying. That's a huge encouragement to me. And then I get to feel known by a large community of believers, by our church family, in a way that I feel a little bit, like, oh man, I wish that it wasn't so one-sided with a lot of people, because a lot of people get to see my heart and my passion on a weekly basis. And a lot of what I'm going through in my life always fuels, my worship and my worship leading. And so they get to see sort of raw stuff that I'm going through in the midst of what I love, which is music, so it's like I'm spoiled rotten because I get to basically put that on, display for people. Not that it's about me. I know people aren't watching me specifically, but as I lead people to worship God, they get to see a part of me that builds sort of a friendship that I just feel I want it to be more often, for it to be symmetrical rather than asymmetrical with our family.
Since we're talking about music, there's a guy that plays guitar on our worship team. His name's Connor, and Connor has a special relationship with Jerilyn.
It's special.
So Connor and Jerilyn have been dating now for over a year, right?
Yep, we started dating March last year, 2019.
Yeah, and who exactly gets the credit for?
That's funny.
Let's put this on record.
So funny. Well, I can say I'm pretty sure Connor would give you credit.
Oh, okay, good.
That he would say that you're prompting to ask, telling him to ask me out was.
Can you get
was a
that
big
in
deal.
writing and give it to Kiki, because Kiki thinks that she's responsible for it.
Kiki would argue that she is the one who told you to do that, so she's the most base level person who gets credit.
It's kind of like that idea in Friends where they're like, "Whose idea was that?" And Joey's like, "It was mine," and they're like, "No, it was my idea."
Yeah.
And I said we should do this. And Joey's like, which was the new idea? Come on.
I love it.
So it's like that kind of thing where Kiki's like, we should set Jer up with somebody. And I'm like,
absolutely.
Hey, how about Connor?
Yeah.
And I'll go ahead and text Connor and say, you should ask Jerilyn out on a date. And Kiki goes, that was all me?
That was all me? Yeah, you're like, wait, it's not fair.
Like, hold on. Because I actually came out and I remember walking into the lobby and being like, hey, why have we not told Connor to ask Jerilyn out? And so then I actually called Connor.
Yes.
And said,
he remembers that. Yeah.
And said, you should ask Jerilyn on a date. And I remember Connor's reaction was words. And he did that a few times with this. Well, I could tell he was just so like, he did not know what to say. And he would literally say the word. Words. And then of course I sent you the text the other night.
Yes, that was so
between
sweet.
Connor and I saying,
so
I saved it too, which I don't say very many texts. So, but yeah, so tell us about Connor a little bit, your relationship.
Well, it's special because Connor, the very first moment that he ever was exposed to me was he was walking from the parking lot into this building, and I was leading worship already, so he heard my voice first, my singing voice. So that was kind of special because he was like, oh man, like
whoever that is,
she can sing, and this is going to be cool. Like this worship is going to be good because I can already, hear the word. It wasn't just my voice; like he could hear the whole band.
Jerilyn is very arrogant. I'm just kidding.
But we've been friends for almost a decade now,
right.
So we were friends for a long time, and I think he'd be okay with me sharing this, but a special part of our story is that back when we were friends, he actually prayed, Lord, if I get married someday, could it be somebody who's like Jerilyn?
No way.
So he didn't pray like for me by name. Like he didn't say, please let me be married to Jerilyn, but he by name mentioned that, and he said that this is the only woman that he ever did this with by name, but said, could she be someone like Jerilyn, and listed some qualities.
Good thing it ended up being you, because
I know.
Can you imagine him telling his wife, oh yeah, I prayed for somebody that was a lot like Jerilyn. You're like Jerilyn. So the last thing I want to do here, is there any other things what's something super interesting about you that maybe people wouldn't guess? Like something to the point of, or to the status of like Garrett did ballet.
Oh.
Like something that just would not be expected.
My voicemail used to be lyrics from one of Eminem's songs that I rewrote.
Would you like to perform that for us now?
No. Don't make me do that. Just when you called, you got lyrics to the tune of an Eminem song that were
at
implying
some point,
that you should leave a message. Yes.
Okay, great. Because that sounds phenomenal. That sounds wonderfully entertaining. So I want to. Is there anything else that you feel like people should know about? It doesn't have to be silly. It can be whatever it is.
I mean,
you mentioned earlier. You did mention your dad. People have been praying for your dad. Is that okay for me to ask for you to share a little bit about that?
Absolutely, yeah. My dad when I was 9 years old, he had a really 15-hour-long brain surgery to remove a tumor in his brain. And he's having that had very long-term side effects that he's been dealing with for the past 20 plus years. But just last year in February, he started dealing with some new side effects that have been kind of debilitating type of things. So I've just been, we've been as a family navigating, how to ask for help to see what's wrong. And we're still kind of not 100% sure what's wrong. And so I really appreciate anyone who's listening to just pray for my dad that it hurts to see someone else hurting, and our family's so blessed. We've got a lot of good things going on too, but it's hard for me to see my dad hurting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you've been able to go back a couple times over the last few months, right, and see him.
Right.
And we've been praying for him, and I know there's a lot of people throughout the church praying for him too.
Right.
I want to ask you before we take off. I want to ask you some just little get to know you questions. There's nothing crazy in this list, but so far, every time I do this, and I shared this with you earlier, nobody seems to like this part, and I never have understood that. Just because
you're like, this is my element.
This. I would love to just go through all this. Is basically just a little survey of who you are. So, you talked about your hobbies before. What are your hobbies now?
Does fibbage count?
Yes, it does, because fibbage, again, one of my first experiences in Santa Rosa was over at the Winardi house playing fibbage with the crew, and I got to see firsthand Kiki's competitivenely.
Yes, I love it.
Because she wanted to win at fibbage.
Absolutely.
It was definitely noticeable. So any other hobbies, or do you just want to leave it at fibbage?
Let's leave it at fibbage. I think that's the best highlight for right now.
You and I have often said the things. You say it more often than I do. I think you say your spirit animal.
My spirit animal, yes.
And which is what?
I say a couple different people, but Michael Scott, I think, is the one that I say most often.
What were the other ones? There was one that you said that I cracked up because it was so obscure.
I can't remember. There's just, I have spirit animal crushes too. I wish this was my spirit animal.
That's so
if
funny.
I could be anything essence wise, I would
That's so funny.
that.
Okay. So there's also, by the way, some of these questions have absolutely no point to them whatsoever.
Love it.
Favorite movie or TV show?
Ooh, I really am a sucker for The Office and Friends. I know that's cliche, but that's a big thing. And then favorite movie, I absolutely love, I know people would hate me for this if they're diehard Pride and Prejudice fans, but I love the most recent Keira Knightley version of Pride and Prejudice. For more than the story, for the cinematography
Don't a lot of
and
people
stuff.
like that? Or did it not?
Well, I think there's people who are kind of purists, even the Emma movie they just redid. People who love the story, the ways
the
that
Jane Austen stories,
right? If they mess with the story a little bit, it gets frustrating. So, but I didn't read the story first; I saw the movie first.
Oh, sure,
that helped me.
Yeah. So, when you first arrived around here, because you mentioned Friends was your favorite TV show,
yes,
I believe you challenged me to a Friends trivia competition, and this has happened. Well.
I don't think I did.
It got shut down fairly quick because
I sucked.
Because
because
Andrea did the same thing, and then people actually did this. They pulled up Friends trivia things, and I blew her out of the water, and she was just like, "Okay, never mind." And I think
that I would have.
You got scared off. It also might have been one of those moments where Jer was just messing with me, because you do that with me sometimes, where
That's
you just
true.
see if you can push my buttons, which is also one of my favorite things.
It's
that's
a two-way street in that department.
Great. I love it. Like Kiki saying that she's gonna tell everybody that the meeting's a half hour earlier, so everybody can start a meeting, and then I show up late because I hate being late.
Josh each other. Yes.
I think that's hilarious. Anytime you can exploit somebody's tendencies or quirks or whatever. If you can exploit it to make yourself laugh or other people laugh, I'm all for it. Because I love laughing. I love it when people can laugh, even if it's at my expense. So you mentioned, did you say George MacDonald's your favorite author?
Ooh, favorite author lately has been Dallas Willard, but probably C.S. Lewis would lock down that.
Oh, okay, cool.
For me.
What's the last book you read?
Oh, I'm in the process of trying to finish Spirit of the Disciplines by Dallas Willard. For whatever reason, it's so meaty. So I actually am not ashamed at all of the fact that I'm going quite slowly. But
okay.
That's what I'm in right now still.
So
I did a Zoom class kind of on that book a little bit, so I still haven't finished it.
Okay. If you could have one conversation with anyone from the Bible, and don't give the obvious answer of Jesus.
Right.
Anyone from the Bible, who would it be?
Solomon.
Oh, interesting.
Solomon. Yeah, I think I would want to talk to
So far,
Solomon.
everybody's been like Moses, Paul. You know, like
Really?
the kind of the obvious. Not, I won't say obvious, but like Moses would be a fascinating conversation just because of what he went through. So Solomon was not one I was expecting.
Yeah.
That's cool. Why?
Well, I was considering whether I wanted to say Solomon or David, but I think I would like to.
David was my original answer.
Oh man, so I think David, one of my all-time, David and John, my two favorite probably in terms of like, whoa, you guys are incredible. But I would have liked to have the opportunity to ask Solomon about David and hear it from Solomon's perspective. And then I really I've always been really drawn to the story where, Solomon he asks for wisdom, and everybody says it that way, that Solomon asked for wisdom. But if you read it closely, what happened is really that he kind of asked God, what should I ask for? And God said wisdom, you know, and like,
interesting.
So it's kind of an interesting, like, just the fact that he had the, I think it's pretty genius, but to God be like, I'll give you pretty much anything you ask for. And he'd be like, well, what should I ask for? You know, like I think that's really cool.
To know what, I'd
like to interact with the person who that was their default. Like that was his gut reaction, is like, well, give me advice. What would you ask for if you were me? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because I don't think I would have thought to do that if God was like, what would you like? I'll do, you know, not like a genie thing, but like, I'm willing to give you anything that you ask for. I don't know that I would have been like, well, what would you have me ask for?
So what about if you could have a conversation, let's go non-biblical person. It could be historical. It could be somebody current. Doesn't have to be somebody currently alive either. It could be just anybody.
I think I would choose Tom Hanks.
Oh my goodness.
Love Tom Hanks.
Again, not what I was expecting from Jerilyn. I was philosophy. I'm like, what, Aristotle?
No,
something
Hanks.
like that, where it just be Tom Hanks. Why in the world? Great, he's cool, but why in the world Tom Hanks?
Tom Hanks reminds me an awful lot of my dad, and my dad doesn't look very much like Tom Hanks. Like, they have similar body frame, but you wouldn't think that he looks like Tom Hanks, but lots of people have told my dad, hey, I know this is really weird, but like, you remind me a lot of Tom Hanks. And so my dad, Tom Hanks is like America's dad. So I'm like, this is how awesome my dad is. People tell him he's like Tom Hanks.
Like what it is, and that's funny.
But I would love my dad to be there when I talk to him. But
that's not part of the rules.
I know,
I'm
right?
just kidding.
I changed the rules, Garrett.
Okay, you can change the rules. That's fine.
But yeah, I think that his skill, it's kind of one of those asymmetric things where I talk about how like people get to see my heart, but I don't always get to see theirs. I feel like I've seen so much of Tom Hanks' heart, so maybe I would just make him listen to me the whole time.
I would just want to hear him talk. He's got such an interesting voice. That's cool. Favorite food?
Eggs Benedict.
Nice. Okay. Vacation spot, or either favorite vacation spot or a dream vacation spot.
It would be 50-50 tie between Brazil and Italy.
Both that you have been to, that you would go back.
Correct.
Okay.
Right,
what about somewhere you've never been that you would go to?
Man, there's a lot. I would really like to go, either China, Japan. I just have never been past Europe, so I'd like to go out there. Also Dubai. My sister got to live in Dubai for like 2 years, and that I'm jealous of that. So I'd love to get to go see.
Dubai is kind of a fascinating place,
isn't it? It's and then and India. I want to see the whole world. So I haven't seen those things yet.
Yeah, I've always been really fascinated. The two places I always say is Egypt and Australia, because Egypt, I've always been fascinated with Egyptology and just things that have to do with it. But then Australia, I'm like, until I see like all these posts about the spiders and the bugs and things that happen in Australia, I'm like, maybe I don't want to do that.
Spiders that eat birds.
Just what?
Google it later.
Sorry, no, that'll give me nightmares. That's got 2020 written all over it. Dream car?
Oh, my Hyundai Tiburon that I had to give away. Not had to. I traded it in for the stupid car I have right now. It's a hamster wheel.
It's a hamster wheel.
No, I'm blessed with a phenomenal car that runs and it's reliable, blah, blah, blah. But I had to trade in my baby that I love. So if I could have any car, I'd take that back.
I think my first truck was I would love to still have that truck just because I loved it. It got stolen and torched.
No, that's terrible.
When I was in high school, yes.
Bad.
Stolen and torched. I loved that. Yeah.
Sad.
Just took it for joyride and then lit it up. You know what though?
Wow.
I had my Bible in the front seat. And so I would love someday to hear some story about, somebody who was in prison and remembered the Bible that in
Right?
the car that they had stolen and torched. I'm hoping that one day that becomes a story and I hear about it and go, that was me.
Oh,
That was my
word.
Bible. Okay, and then I'm gonna 2 last questions. I'll say them both. But so what do you love to do on your day off? And then a bucket list item of something that you'd want to do in your life, like skydiving, something like that.
So on my day off, I take naps, plural.
Plural naps.
That's my favorite activity.
That's
on
a
my
good
day
band
off.
name.
Plural naps.
The plural
naps. That was one of my favorite bonding moments with Connor. I said, "What did you do
naps.
today?" And he was like, "I took naps." And I was like, "Plural, impressive. I love that. I can get on board."
Yeah, that's great.
And then my bucket list.
There's like a couple of cats.
Yeah. But I have a dream hotel. I really love luxury hotels, not in that I've stayed in tons of them, but I love Googling them and reading all the like travel TripAdvisor reviews of them and Yelp reviews and stuff like that.
When you say luxury, do you mean like luxury in a unique way? Or luxury is just like, it's just luxury?
I like reading about hotels where the person who made it, it's like this is like their life culmination. Okay. So like the art of a
not
luxury
like
hotel.
A chain of hotels.
No. Yeah, chains not out the door. Okay. Don't like chains. Well, cool. I mean, like it's just not like what I'm especially going to read Yelp reviews about. But there's a hotel in Amsterdam called Hotel 27, which by Eric Torin, it's like his life culmination. And I would love to stay there someday, but we'll have to see.
One of the things that I love doing about these is that I learn a lot about you that I didn't already know. And like I said, I spend a lot of time with you, but there's things like that I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know that I ever would have known that.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
I
it's
don't
not
know
something
if
you
that's
really
something would
volunteer.
ever come up, right? Yeah. So that's why I ask them those questions. And just like you saying you'd talk with Solomon and Tom Hanks. Solomon and Tom Hanks. Great answers there. So, okay, Jared, well, thanks for doing this. I always appreciate when people do the one-on-ones. I have a better idea now what your theme song will be. And you know what? It's going to be really hard not to do something hip hop because of your Eminem song answer.
Do Mockingbird, make mock. That was the song.
Oh, yeah. And so if anybody wants to know how that went, just come up to Jerilyn on Sundays between services and say, can you sing or rap whatever your answering machine outgoing message was?
I will do it as a thank you for listening to
this will give us
my interview podcast.
A good gauge of how many people listen to this. Now you've got so as of right now, Garrett Ward holds he's got the most listens.
Interesting.
Which does not surprise anybody.
Of course.
Because everybody loves Garrett Ward. But,
absolutely.
Yeah, so we'll see exactly if you beat, but seriously, I would love it if you guys came up to Jerilyn and asked her to sing this song, because I haven't heard it yet, but I'm going to make her share it with me after this. So, all right, Jerilyn, well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you,
don't forget that the Spring Hills podcast has a lot of other things on here on this feed, so you can find out a lot of different information from the Spring Hills podcast. For example, Jerilyn and I, right before this, we recorded one about being a small group leader.
Right.
So there's lots of cool things on here. So if this is your first time listening, you can go back and listen to previous podcasts. There's one-on-one interviews with other staff members. There's different interviews with staff members about different ministries going on at church and different things like that. And also a bunch of sermon recaps that were the first things that we did here.
Yes.
And now we're doing sermon previews, which is kind of cool too. So Brett gives a little like 8-minute hot take of like, here's what the sermon's going to be like. So anyways, thanks for listening to the Spring Hills podcast. Check out springhills.org for more information on the content that we have online. There's a lot of it. And then, of course, download the free Spring Hills app. And we will see you this weekend for Church on the Lawn.